and welcome to the Build and Exit podcast. I'm really excited. Our next guest is Alicia Barlow. So I know Alicia well. She actually works with Wilkinson's as one of our freelance CFOs. But personally, Alicia used to work in corporate as an accountant and left in 2016. Has launched into property and actually has a portfolio of 12 properties, and has recently in 22 started her business acquisition journey. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation about leaving corporate world, moving into property, and then why she's decided to sort of also do acquisitions alongside property. So I'll hand over to you, Alicia, if you want to give a bit of a background about yourself.
Oh, thanks, Julie, and thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on the podcast.
You're welcome.
I think firstly to start with, so the journey into finance for me started at a young age because I wanted to understand money and how it worked. So my mum worked in corporate governance at the council. So that was kind of where it all started. I left school, did my qualifications, did my A-levels, and then thought everybody was off to uni. It was like the done thing. Everyone goes to uni. And I thought it doesn't really feel like it's the right setting for me. Like university just wasn't the right place. I wanted to earn and learn. And at the time, I was already building a small portfolio of properties with an ex-partner of mine who was an estate agent. So once that happened, I kind of went through and got a job with a small practice in Manchester, where I was thinking, you know, it's a small pond, big fish scenario rather than drowning in a big top four firm. And I learned the very basics of bookkeeping all the way up through to sort of finance director level, and qualified there. We also set up a club for businesses, so ambitious businesses, which was really great. You know, we used to do like a BNI or like breakfast club sort of a thing with them to help them understand how to work on the business rather than in the business. And at this time, I was only about 19. So I'm kind of taking in all this new information and going, wow, I'd love to do this for myself. So that's when I started to do just that. And I had an employed position. So I was self-employed. I left the practice and I went self-employed for a while in industry, worked with many different industries and other practices as well. And then got offered a job to move into a company that was growing from 3 million turnover to 30 million turnover. And I was their head of finance and then recruited into the FD role quite quickly. Grew with that business, really enjoyed it. I had a whale of a time, gained tons of experience, not just from sort of a finance perspective, but from a business perspective as well, because I was kind of their advisor and I was learning as they grew. And that scale was an incredible learning curve for me, especially at such a young age, because at this time I was maybe 23, 24. So it was
which is why we steal your expertise now.
Exactly, yeah, because you have that broad sort of exposure to how you put together a set of accounts and how important it is to the operationals, the commercials, the sales, and how that there's a symbiotic relationship within the business with finance. You know, a lot of people think we're just kind of the bean counters that sit in the corner, but you know, ultimately we should be championing, working with other departments quite regularly. So that was really what I enjoyed doing. And whilst I was there, I had my son. So 2015, Archie was born. And within 3 months of having him, I was back to work full time, 60 hours a week. They were floating the company and I never really saw him. And I thought, what was the point of having my son? So I had a bit of a change of heart, a massive lifestyle change, a huge sort of like epiphany, and said, I need to replace my corporate income with income again, which I had done previously with the portfolio we had when I was younger. So I said to my husband, look, this is what I want to do. Do you want to do it together? Can you support me whilst I move myself from corporate to property? And I did a little bit of both. So I was self-employed whilst building the property portfolio. And in 2019, I went full-time into property and decided that was what I wanted to do. So we're building the portfolio, it's all going well, and then COVID happened. And I had a lot of ex-clients or people who I worked with previously, people who I was employed by, ringing me and saying, we're going to need some help with our forecasts. So people were going for bounce back loans, people were going for, you know, all the funding that the government were giving out. And I said, yeah, I'm happy to help. So it's kind of started from there. So I've kind of been doing both together. And I was approached by a network, a community of property investors who I love to bits, partners in property, in mid-2020, and asked to host their Manchester community, which I was more than happy to do. I really enjoy it, and I still do that now. So we have a great property community up in the northwest in Manchester. So if any of the listeners are around, feel free to get in touch and come along. It's a very safe community, and we pride ourselves on not being a sales vehicle for property courses. We are just there to share challenges, share successes, and just keep each other motivated in this very difficult time for property investors and developers as well. So that was kind of where I met my business partner now, and we're working together, buying more properties together, building that portfolio. But it got to a point where I was last year saying, look, in terms of cash flow, there are better opportunities out there. And with my background, why don't we start to look for asset-backed businesses? Because there are quite a few businesses out there in staple industries which are stable, not recession-proof, but extremely, well protected from most recessions. So we picked the industries that we thought would work for us and we had the same values with, and we just went out to market and said, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to do it, and it has to have a freehold property. So we've started to build our pipeline and our acquisitions from there. So we're open to new opportunities all the time, which is great. Yeah. So I hope that helps, Julie. It's quite a bit of from one end to the other then. In a nutshell.
No, it's good. Everybody likes the story because obviously it's quite a new podcast, but the whole point of this podcast is to talk about people's acquisition and sort of investment and, in the end, I suppose, exit strategy. So there's going to be lots of different guests talking about it. So your acquisition that closed, so you did one last year, didn't you? Was it in 22? And it was a bakery, was it?
A bakery.
So talk us through a bit about how did you find the journey of the acquisition?
It was quick. It was a 6-week acquisition. So we were start to finish in 6 weeks. This opportunity came across my desk because the owners had a sale fall through. And they just wanted to get out. They were ready. I think they were 2 days away from completion when the first buyer pulled the plug. And we came in with an offer that we felt was reflective of the current sort of economic climate, and also for the building, the asset, which is where the business operates from. We managed to secure that at 45% discount from asking, which we thought was a pretty good deal. But they equally had what they wanted and what was most important to them, which was the freedom to remove themselves from the business. So we agreed a 3-month handover period. And from that point, we're now, I'd say from maybe 2 weeks ago, completely handed over, and the business is running very well. And we're moving towards scaling that and getting the marketing up to date and bringing it into the 21st century. So yeah, it's super exciting. And the food's delicious. Yeah. So yeah.
Oh yeah, do you eat a lot of it?
I try not to.
Do you eat a lot? Yeah.
Not with summer coming up.
How did you transition that so quick? So in the 3 months then, so you're not working in the business, no?
No.
So you've managed to sort of buy this sort of self-generating business. And so how did that handover work, and how have you managed to achieve it?
Okay, so it was quite simple for us because they already had some good processes and systems in place from an accounts perspective and a sales perspective, especially with the till within the shop. So there are 2 elements to this. So it generates income from the retail shop, and it also generates income from wholesale customers, which are restaurants, schools, and other businesses. Now, for us, we already had a key team in place. And one of the challenges for us was to identify if there was any risk of losing any of those key players. Now, to reduce that, I went to meet them all before completion, explained what the plans were for the business, asked if they had any concerns, asked if they had any ideas about growth for the business. And the great thing for us as buyers was they were screaming out for some leadership. And that's what we were looking to do. So the bakers that were in the bakery, there's 2 key bakers, and we employed a third. One of the lads who's been there since he was 16, we promoted him to bakery manager, to give him more autonomy and accountability for his role and for the bakery, because he knows it better than I do. And we employed a retail manager who now looks after the staff, the rotas, and the shop side of things. So that was how that handover was dealt with. So within sort of the first 2 weeks, we already had our key team in place. And then it was a case of me visiting once a week just to do the handover, make sure the processes were in place, support them in putting the processes in place and getting them written up, and just effectively going through what I had, which was an action tracker. So I made an action tracker of risk and opportunity and just said, this is the stuff that needs to happen. These are the people that are responsible for it ultimately, but I kind of supported them through that process. And by doing that weekly, we got to a point now where I'll be visiting once a month, reviewing the numbers, reviewing the sales, reviewing the accounts, which are all dealt with offsite, and then going from there with the team. So really, we've just left them to run the business as they see fit, because that's what they've done for the last 15, 20 years between them. So, all we'd like to input is new ideas, new marketing strategies, and increase the sales.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I know on my acquisition, I did a similar thing. The one I've just closed, I went to see the staff. And I think if you bring people into the journey, and I had exactly the same conversations, and we've made changes literally within the first couple of weeks, and they seem to be loving it. So people love the autonomy so change can be scary, but I don't think it is if you bring people in the right position. Yeah, so it's interesting about it because I did that on my acquisition. I think if you bring people on the journey with you, they are happier, because I know we've made quite a lot of quick changes. I only closed mine 2 weeks ago, and we've already made loads of changes and upsell opportunities and things like that. So I think it's great when you bring the team in. In terms of, so you obviously got in this new staff and promoted. Do you feel then that the price you paid fairly represented the additional costs that you had to put into the business? Is that something you thought about when you bought the business?
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, with any acquisition, there are costs that you don't know about, especially when you're buying within 6 weeks. But we felt like the discount really reflected what we could do with the business and what was achievable and what was cost effective to do. Now, obviously, when I would say someone buying a business this year, it's very difficult for someone coming into a business in 2023 when the cost for 22 and 21 can be affected by COVID. And that needs to be reflected in the numbers that you do. But equally, just this year alone, we've seen the budget yesterday. There's going to be a lot of changes for businesses, and that includes corporation tax rates are increasing quite significantly. National insurance is increasing quite significantly for employers. National minimum wage also maybe a 9 to 10% increase. And these aren't insignificant figures. So because of my background, I was aware of this and able to calculate that in. But I know there's going to be probably a lot of business owners out there on new acquisitions that are happening right now based on numbers from maybe 6 months ago, because these things don't always happen overnight. That was quite an unusual and very quick acquisition. If these acquisitions take anything between 12 to 18 months, that picture can change completely. So it would be my recommendation for anyone to reevaluate the numbers on a quarterly basis and definitely before completion. To ascertain whether the business is still viable, financially viable, but equally for the future as well. Yeah. So that was something that we'd already planned in. But like I say, there's other things in the bakery that have gone wrong, like some bits of equipment have died and you go, oh no, we didn't expect that. But we did have a decent contingency in place to cover us. So we're okay.
Yeah, and the forecasting is definitely, we know because we do a lot of it with Wilkinson's, the acquisitions. We're probably doing about 5 every month, and I know that people have struggled. They don't sometimes they don't know how to build the right forecasting if they're not sort of financial backgrounds, because they see the numbers and don't always know how to plan the future and also the risks. So it's interesting, isn't it? I love the acquisition process, and helping people buy the businesses is brilliant. So you've got your properties, you've got your bakery. You got more acquisitions in the pipeline?
Yeah, so the pipeline's full with the care homes as well. So we're excited to do that, and we're looking potentially at doing maybe 3 or 4 in the next 2 years. There's 2 in conveyancing at the moment that we're looking to achieve, and then there is another one that we're looking to view next week, which will fit nicely within the group. Now, care is an industry that we're all quite passionate about. We feel our values lend nicely to, and effectively it's just a large home for the older generation. It's very much like property, buy to let, HMO. which is house and multiple occupancy. You know, rather than professionals or students, we've got retired or vulnerable adults in there. So for me, it lent nicely to what we were already doing. We enjoy the fact that there is legislation in place. There is a standard body that you need to report to. That for me gives you comfort as a business owner that you have support, but you're also accountable for what you're doing. There are a lot of industries out there that are just gung-ho and can do whatever they fancy. And that for me wasn't really something we were interested in. So it's nice to have that barrier to entry where we can say we're compliant and we've got the right, you know, things in place to tick all the boxes and make it a really great business, especially for the residents at the care home. So yeah, so that's really exciting. That's on the radar for the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I always ask, especially people in property and acquisitions and entrepreneurial mindsets, you've got these properties and these acquisitions. Do you have sort of like a longer term exit strategy in mind on what you want to achieve later down the line?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny actually, because a lot of people think about retirement as you go and put your feet up on a beach and you just cut yourself off from the world. And for me, that's not what I'm looking to achieve. The exit for me is very much, I still want to be involved. I'd love to still be a consultant in some capacity to businesses that I like to work with, because I like to help people. You know, when you own a business, it's not all black and white in terms of, yes, you can just go and put your feet up on a beach. I do feel that I would still have some involvement in the businesses. And I would like to have that involvement as well, especially from a strategic and a sort of a scaling perspective. That for me is what interests me and excites me, gets me out of bed in the morning. So it's difficult to say exit in terms of retirement, because I don't really think I ever would. I'd always want to be in the industries, in property, helping people, especially as part of Partners in Property. Just being within a community where you can just go and it's just basically going having a chat with your mates. That's what it is. So for me, I think I'd always have, you know, a finger in the pie. Pardon the pun. Yeah. but I would do. And I think that's important for the kids as well, because for my kids, it's more of a legacy thing as well. I want to be able to leave them something that they can take on and enjoy. But I don't want them to have that entitled mindset. For me, they need to be able to come into the business and work in the business and understand the business. And if they can't understand it, then they can't be a part of it. You know, I don't want them just coming in, buying a brand new Ferrari and then driving off into the sunset and ruining all the hard work that we've put into it. But for me, it's more, the long-term exit strategy is more about building an income which I can live off, and I have the freedom to choose as and when I do what I do within the businesses or anything really. So yeah, it's having that ability to, if I want to have 6 months off, I can have 6 months off and I can afford to. And I've got the right teams in place that can allow me to do that. But I know that I'm not that kind of person that probably would end up having 6 months off. I probably have about 3 weeks and then be bored and want to come back. So yeah, it's difficult to kind of really nail that answer, Julie, but that's how it would look for me at the moment. That's what, and obviously that all being well and my health being well and, you know, my family's health being well, that would obviously need to play a big part. But yeah, that's ideally the goal for now.
Yeah. And, you know, I actually quite love that answer, because we talk a lot about exit strategy, Wilkinson's, and sometimes when you say the word exit, people think, oh my God, that means a full sale. It means I don't work anymore. But actually, it's not really what you mean. It's turning people's mind that an exit can be anything from just saying, I only want to work 4 days a week, not 5 days, to actually saying, you know, I want to fully sell the business. Because even if there's different ways to sell it. Even if you did like a management buyout, you could maybe keep some retainership of ownership anyway, still get some disposable income. And I think what's sensible about what you're doing is, you know, you're getting an income stream you could live off. So if unfortunately Mother Nature did take its course and you had to do something, that's probably the bit that some people don't think about, is even if you don't want to do it, sometimes you might be forced to do it. And and it sounds like you've got a bit of a setup that if that happened, you could probably cope, but actually you would want to carry on if you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah. Oh, and also you're not allowed to go anywhere because you're too busy with us. So,
and I like working with you, Julie.
Yeah. So, and we're talking about asset-backed business, and we'll bring up our little our event that we've got in 2 weeks' time. Our workshop,
Absolutely,
our first one,
so
our first official workshop. So, and I think there's going to be 20 people we've got on that now, haven't we?
We've got signed up and all booked 20 people in Manchester on Saturday, the 25th. Yeah, next
Definitely.
Saturday.
So probably by the time this podcast
the
launches,
workshop will be exciting.
Yeah, it will be. And by the time this podcast launches, I'm sure that workshop will probably be over. But it's interesting to mention it because a lot of people have been interested, haven't they? Especially with our backgrounds in the acquisitions and exit strategy planning. So there'll definitely be more to come. So if people are looking then for want to come on the asset back workshop or want to maybe look to see if they might have a business that they want to sell, like where can they find you? On socials?
Okay. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Alicia Barlow, or Facebook, Alicia Rose Barlow, or Instagram, and it's Property Solutions Bolton. You'll be able to find me on there. We've also got a website as well, which is rosealexanderproperty.com. And there's a link on there where you can contact me through a form if you want to. So there's plenty of places that can get hold of me.
Okay. So, thanks so much for sharing your journey. I think it's really interesting, and obviously we have men and women on the podcast because it's interesting to see different people's journeys. But I think women in business as well, it can be quite inspirational for other women who maybe are thinking about doing this type of journey and taking that plunge to get out there. So, thanks so much for sharing your journey with us today.
And you're welcome, Julie. Thanks for having me.
That's all right. And I'm looking forward to the podcast launching soon.